do multiple roles. Don't see yourself as a person who brings one skill set to the table. You have to understand the business drivers. That's a given. You have to understand how your business makes money, how the parts come together. So the first thing that you have to change in the teams is to change the mindset. So when you want to innovate as a CFO, you have to create that culture of innovation in your team. And that culture is not going to come about when people are doing things.
Hi everyone, welcome to Diaries. Today, I'm super glad to be joined by an amazing guest from engineering in Bangalore to the CFO of Barclays in Dubai. Ramkumar Balasubramaniam is the man behind the numbers for Barclays MEA. His career in banking has spanned 2 decades, from Citi to ICICI to Barclays. I'm so glad to have you on, and it's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Just to get started, having a CFO on is always fascinating, right? Because all of you have different streams of thought and different types of workflows. What's one assumption about CFOs that people typically get wrong?
Yeah, so if you look at from the outside and if you ask the business folks, they might say that the CFO is the person who's the gatekeeper, who says no most often than not. But ultimately, it's the CFO who's holding the keys to the strategy, to the delivery of the plan. So if anything is coming through, it's coming through for a very, very valid reason. The CFO is not only managing costs, but ensuring that the business gets to the right stage, the revenues are hit, and the overall profitability is right. So CFO sees the full big picture. Actually, very nice questions to start off right away itself. I have a very key example that I quote very often. And this is the story of the 5 blind men and the elephant, right?
Okay.
So there were 5 blind men in an Indian village. And this story was told to me by my mother when I was a child. And it's a very common story, though. Yeah, and they used to visualize the world with stories that people told them. So they only knew about certain things. And they wanted to know what an elephant was. So somebody said it's a very dangerous animal. Somebody told them that it is a very big animal. So on and so forth. They argued. And the villagers had enough of their argument. They took them to the palace of the king to feel the elephant because they can't see the elephant.
Mm.
So each person sort of felt the elephant from different parts. One person tugged at the trunk, somebody touched the ear, somebody pulled the tail, somebody went to the legs, and somebody felt the body of the elephant. Each person then formed their own opinion about what the elephant was.
Okay.
Somebody said it's a rope, somebody said it's a fan, somebody said it feels like a big pipe, somebody said no, it's a wall, it's strong, and somebody said the legs are like a tree. That's what they touched. And after they had finished speaking, they got together and they argued. Everybody said, no, this is what it is. And you are totally wrong. The king came and then told them, this is the big picture. You were not able to put it together. All of you are right. But the summation of what you see is what the real elephant is. And that's what the CFO sees. He does not see one aspect of what's happening. You see the full company, you see the full picture, and then you play a role. So that's very, very key.
I think that is perhaps the most remarkable example you could have used. Because, that's another question I feel like when in our pre-qualifying call, I asked this as well. A lot of people consider the CFO as the gatekeeper, right? As like the custodian and the guardian of the company. And now they want CFOs to be more strategy focused. But I think you're right in saying there has to be a holistic view with at least one person. And this person will then decide what the strategy is top down. Coming back to, you individually, what was your journey like, transitioning from that engineering in Bangalore all the way to CFO in Barclays? And especially because you mentioned you came in at the height or in the midst of a financial crisis when you transitioned to Dubai. So what's your journey been?
Yes, it's been very interesting. Like you said, I did my engineering, actually mechanical engineering. Went out to do my MBA. And actually when I did my MBA, I had a very strong urge to say I want to do marketing. So FMCG marketing only, because FMCG marketing meant that you had the chops, you did the hard grind in sales, and then you became a product manager. And that was really valued at the time. And right out of campus, I actually got an FMCG job. I joined a paints company as a product manager.
I had
with ICI Paints, I was the Dulux product manager for Solvent Bone Paints for a couple of years, launched products, did product launches, local campaigns, promotions, you name it, pretty much everything. Okay. And it was a very, very, very fun ride in the sense of how you could manage a business and make an impact as a simple product manager, because you have multiple depots, you have salespeople, and then you run your campaigns and you support growth of the business. So it could clearly see impact of what you did. It actually worked very well for me that at that time in India, the cards business was just growing. Citi was always very big, but Indian private banks were just picking up, and they wanted cards to be marketed in a way FMCG products were done. So they did not want banking folks. They wanted people from an FMCG background to come and run cards business. So ICICI Bank picked me up for that particular reason. And that was one hell of a ride. In 1 year of what I did in ICICI Bank, I would think it was about a lifetime, 4 or 5 years put together in 1 year.
Interesting.
That is how big the growth was. We went from what were 2,000 EDC terminals in those days. Today, those are the merchant acquiring terminals, to about 22 in that year itself, and pretty much decimated the market, took most of the market share from Citi. And that's where Citi sort of approached me, and I sort of joined Citi.
Just before you go ahead with that, what does it mean to, like, what's the toolkit that you used as an FMCG marketer to now push out cards in that perspective?
So in cards, the biggest thing I did, I'm not sure all of you are familiar with this, the promotion called Akshaya Tritiya. Akshaya Tritiya is a day when people buy gold.
Okay.
So there's this huge craze for jewelry and gold in India, and everybody buys gold on that particular day. So I got in touch with every location where we were big and got contributions from the merchants to then say, if you contribute an X amount of money, I will match the contribution from our bank, and we'll run a promotion which is targeted for your specific customers and actually drive customers to your outlet, right? So actually see real business. So there's one road called Usman Road in Chennai where I myself went, and this happened across India. But the big thing that I did was we had radio spots, we had full newspaper supplements in the leading newspaper, and we had people across the street. So wherever you went, you would get a flyer from ICICI Bank saying spend and go and do it in an ICICI Bank testing. So it was such an overwhelming success for a bank which had its incumbent office in that location, to see that somebody else came and really did something very different, was really noticed. I myself sat and swiped cards from about 8 in the morning till 12 in the night in one of the places.
Okay.
It was real experience to see something coming really in action. You plan for things, but when they really play out and you see the benefit of it playing out, that's when you realize that concept to reality does happen. So that was really, really telling for me. So moving on from FMCG to ICICI Bank, really doing well in cards, joining Citi again in cards. And in Citi, you're part of a high potential group of people, then you were treated as the next generation of leaders. So you had to do 18-month stints in a front office role, in a back office role, in a functions role. So I did that. I did back office, I did front office, and the functions role was typically finance. So that's where I understood, and that's finance was my calling, or my natural fitment to numbers was my calling. And I just like to play back, and it's could be useful for others to know as well. Even when I did the Akshaya Tritiya promotion and did those targeted activities, the work behind the numbers that I had done to target the right stores, to put the people in the right locations, that gave me the greatest joy. And that's what my line manager actually picked up on. He said, I can see this, Ram, that while this promotion has gone so well, the twinkle in your eye when you get the numbers right, or when your analysis has gone right, is far more than even this promotion. That somewhere stayed with me, because he was typically the idea guy and I was the numbers and the execution guy, right? Yeah. So it really stayed with me, and then I actually went back to him several years later saying that thanks for that, I've actually ended up being a numbers guy. You had the prescience to say it at that point in time. So that from then moved on to Citi and then to Barclays. So yeah, Citi FP&A head for India, and then Barclays regional FP&A.
Just to stop you for a second, I want to understand how, when you did that stint, that rotation in Citi's finance function, typically finance is a back office function, right? It's an internal controls processes function. The way you did your cards is almost market sizing in real time. It's forward thinking, it's strategy alignment, and it's execution of the strategy that you've defined, right? Was the Citi finance function also forward thinking? Was it something that changed your mind when you sat and said it's not just internal controls?
So the Citi finance function is a very interesting one. They only take chartered accountants who passed chartered accountancy in their first attempt, and many are rank holders.
Interesting.
And there I was an engineer, marketing MBA,
Yeah.
and joining that team. But it was really good for me in that the role that I took on was something which worked directly with the CFO because it is FP&A and actually the CEO and other heads of businesses. So I was sort of weaving in all the thought process from all the functions. So I was not a technical accounting guy. That gave me, I had the business insight, but that gave me a good chance to understand every business and pick up finance along the way. So what I brought to the table was my understanding of how numbers are reported, which is fine, but understanding technical stuff from other peers in there. And very, very good thing about that setup was there was a very strong group of people who challenged each other. Excellent people. Like I said, they were all high decorated chartered accountants, right? So there was a very strong culture of trying to be the best. Not pulling down somebody, but trying to be the best.
So it was camaraderie and competition.
Yeah, camaraderie and competition. And that was that. If I think back to my life, those things are the points where you grow the most, where you learn the most, right? So there is real peer, not pressure, but peer network, which is also trying to do the best. And then you sort of pick up and then you also rise and everybody rises as a whole. So that was really, really interesting in Citi. And that's where I think when Barclays was setting up their regional office for all of emerging markets here, they said, this person runs Citi FP&A in India. So we would like you to come and run the retail FP&A for us in this region. So that's how I ended up coming to Dubai. Now 17 years and going. Yeah.
Wow. That's very impressive. Congratulations. I was thinking about this as well. It's fascinating because you do really have an overarching view. Like I would imagine it to be, and I don't want it to be a poor analogy, but see, for example, like a spider, and you have a huge web that you've either found or constructed in bits, and you need to understand how every thread is pulled upon, right? But on a day-to-day basis, because your job is so dynamic, because your function has to be overseeing a bunch of things, what are the absolute critical, this may be a two-parter. The first part being, what's the absolute critical things you need to be doing? Like which teams do you need to be interacting with? Do you have to talk to FP&A and treasury and audits every day? Do you have to talk to maybe the guy in S&T every day, or is that not important? And then as a consequence of that, if you're talking to all these roles every day, what are the core skills that you need to understand those? Because again, you don't have to be highly technical, but you need to have an understanding to pull it all together, right?
Yeah. So if I give you a view of this team that I sort of run, right? So we have financial control, which is core reporting function. That's the accounting function, but that's also the conscience keeper, right? So you are reporting the right numbers to both the regulator, to internal group, as well as in your financial statements and so on and so forth. So that's a conscience keeper. That's very, very critical. It is a engine room, so to speak. It may not face out to other people. It may be very internal facing in the nature of the job.
Of course.
But that is really the conscience keeper role. That is the controls focused role. That cannot go wrong. That foundation is the one your function is built on. On top of it, you have FP&A. So should they close the books, and then you're looking at how it happened when you're trying to do hindsight analysis, or you're looking to focus for the future. That is FP&A. So the FP&A builds off what financial control closes. Treasury is an active job, right? Treasury is an active job. So the treasurer at all points of time is trying to maximize what is the right action to take? Is it to be going long on the liability? Is it to borrow from the group? Is it to place it at central bank? Or is there any other instrument I should be buying? So that is a daily activity. So the working with the treasurer is a daily activity. And then you have other reporting functions, right? So we have a credit function as well, credit supporting function, which does all the reporting. So that function reports to your local credit bureau, Al Ihtiyat Credit Bureau, right? And also the central bank bureau. So that is the core setup for finance, right? And then you have automation folks or technology related folks who also work within finance, looking to automate process. But your day job is to empower your team to deliver their role. It is not to micromanage anybody, right? So if everybody is doing their role very well, you need to step in when there is a need to step in. Most of my role is then outward facing, which is to face off to the stakeholders, be it with the CEO, be it with the business head, or on specific projects and initiatives you want to run. So only when your team is empowered and they're able to deliver their activity, you have the time for yourself to look at more and what you can do and what you can do for the business and get more for the business. For instance, we have now opened nearly 3 more locations in the last 3-4 years. All of those are at the beginning a thought on a paper, but how do you take it to fruition, right? So there's a big.
I find that fascinating because you're right. Once the team internally is set and they're ready, they don't need a lot of hand holding, just oversight. Then you look forward. And especially as, the regional CFO, you're looking at, I feel like not only forget UAE, forget the GCC, but you have North Africa and you have South Africa. You have parts of the Levant, right? So, and, this would be a nice perspective to get because this is a global company. Is it that they send objectives and planning top down and then you have to in those individual silos figure it out? Or do you set objectives in your silos and send it back top up?
So it's a two-way process. Of course, the guardrails are set from the group, right?
Yeah.
The group, because of the sheer size of maybe markets like UK and US, would have that in its sights. But each has a part to the play. Like when you look at strategy itself, right? So you can look at strategy at a company level, you can then look at it at a business level, then you could look at unit level. So think of it that way. So Barclays has an overarching strategy, which the businesses which are there in this region are also implementing. How they go about breaking that and breaking that into plan, which then sort of all comes together in a group plan, is a two-way process. There is communication back and forth, but there is huge merit to what the local management has to give because they understand the market best. They know what products will do well or which segments will do better. So there is a good balance and there is an element of the risk function which can oversee and keep everybody in check to ensure that the right things are happening. So strategy planning is a two-way process.
Do you have a huge outward role with investor relations as well? Or is it internal stakeholders?
So my role, while I have financial statements reporting and stuff like that, the users of our financial statements are the central banks. I don't face off to investors because I'm a branch. So because I run subsidiaries of branches of Barclays, those subsidiaries also, when I publish statements, is still very limited external stakeholders who would use our financial statements. But it is published, it's available for anybody who wants to understand the health of the company. So investor relations for Barclays is managed centrally in the UK.
UK, interesting. And then here, because you're saying you're dealing with the central bank, I'm assuming that's also in all the different subsidiaries in MENA, right? So do you have challenges sometimes to understand that local regulation and how much of it is, because you're located here, but you're also managing South Africa. So do you have to sit down and educate yourself on that regulation changing consistently?
So the regulation in each jurisdiction is different, right? And the kind of setup that you might have for your company in that location, when I say setup, it could be the license type, it could be a banking license, it could be only a brokerage license, it could be a license which says you can only advise and then you don't book any revenue on the local basis. So you have different regulations and different regulators. And different regulators also have a different way of requesting you to submit information and for regulations for you to adhere to. So it is very important that you're absolutely up to date with all the regulations. So the whole thing is a continuous process. So when the new regulations published, there's a huge gap analysis and the fit to purpose, and then ensuring you're ready. And that's when it goes into financial control, right? So before it goes into financial control, you look at the regulation, what is it that you have to do? How do you meet the regulation? Develop it and then give it to BAU. So there's a whole process. There's one separate team which can look at all of this, and it's across locations. It can be very different. What works in one jurisdiction may not work in another jurisdiction.
Very interesting. I feel like all of this would require a component of consistently upskilling yourself, learning, right? And we did a bit of research. You've spoken in a few places, and you spoke about the curse of expertise. Just for our
another pet thing for me, right? So once it's all very well when you're starting out, right? It's all very well when you're starting out. You're really curious. You want to learn new things. You are all ears. You want to absorb things. As we go up in our career, we develop our own biases. We develop thoughts which tell us that this is the right thing. This is the way it should be done. Correct? And after a point, you become immune to other thought process because you already seen something work. You made it work. You think that is the way it should be done. And you sort of shut yourself out to other new thought processes. So that lack of curiosity in trying to pick up something new can become a blind spot. So that curse of expertise is when one is so much of an expert that you're blind to new opportunities and you're not curious enough, like a baby, to explore and understand new things. And especially with all of this advancement in technology and things that we've not seen before. I'm probably working from before you guys were born. So when I used Lotus Notes, there used to be a product called Lotus Notes, right? Which was much before Excel and stuff.
Yeah,
so from
that was
there
why you had a plus in the Excel.
And to get where we are today, if you did not keep in touch with technology and did not upskill yourself, you're going to really fall short, right? So that is a big challenge in terms of people being open to have opinions, to receive feedback, and being open to new technology. So the curse of expertise is to then finally say, be curious and show an interest to learn new things. That's the theme.
Very fascinating. I think that you might have also, because you've been working for quite a long time, you might have seen so much digital transformation come across, right? And sometimes it's not even that people are doing processes in the wrong way. Sometimes it's just technology has rendered that process obsolete and now they have to upskill themselves. How do you face, like, is there a challenge that you face with getting that buy-in from Barclays to digitally transform a certain process?
I would not say from Barclays, because Barclays is a global institution. We have implemented things across our locations. And so very much ahead in terms of what technology can do for the organization, and it's implemented across the board. But as much as I speak to people in the industry, I understand even in this year, the big challenge for the CFO is to give high returns on AI implementation process. But the challenge that I see, and of speaking to other people in the industry, is that the basics are still not right. When I say basics, because you have legacy systems, because you have systems which are not updated over course and they're built on top of broken blocks, you build blocks and blocks of broken blocks. Trying to implement a solution which is high end, which is AI, is not the right thing. So, and I reference this with an example of the Rube Goldberg machine, right? The Rube Goldberg machine is a machine with an intentionally crafted for the purpose of delaying and slowing down a process, right? To make it complicated for the sake of making it complicated. So you might have seen one of these in a museum, or you've seen the golf ball starting from one point, going through some 100 circles, and then finally coming out and cutting an apple, right?
I actually really enjoy those.
So think of that like that. So sometimes processes in a firm can feel like that. So it is more important to fix your data quality, fix your process excellence, get all of those right, and then get into any sort of automation project. Because then when that is done, any sort of resistance that anybody might feel from teams wanting to change is taken away, because real merit is already seen by the teams, because the processes are streamlined. They're already moving forward. They can see that there's so much more time to do other activities, and then a fully automated process will work. So if anybody is facing resistance, this could be an approach to sort of finish off the basics first and then get into the automation project.
It's also very fascinating that you say now it's time to see the returns from implementing AI, right? Because, for a couple of years, everyone is investing in AI. And whether that was internally developing it or externally as a corporate arm, perhaps just putting a certain amount of cash, allocating funds to it. Now it's time for returns to be reaped, I guess. Are there certain parts that you're excited about? Are there certain processes that you think will be automated or can be automated faster?
Yeah, I think if you look at functions which rely on published regulations and rules-based activity, those can absolutely be automated on. Sometimes certain roles have grown in their importance because of the knowledge of the information, because of the availability of information, the experience you have of quoting something from the past and applying it to a particular case scenario. But in case you have obviously AI which can read through reams of information and already quote that case to you and then take it forward, I surely see in terms of some of the advisory practices or some of the auditing practices, these could become much more smaller and smaller as these are already automated using AI. And then time could be spent more valuably on debating and reading through and understanding the actual applicability of the numbers.
Very interesting. And, from a personal standpoint, you'd like to see there being less resistance to change, right? You'd like there to be people saying, okay, this process can be automated and we'd like to move on to more creative thinking and more freer thinking. But then you personally, how do you maintain that upskilling? Do you sit down and do courses? Do you have conversations with experts? What's your process before you bring it down to your...
Yeah, so it's all about innovation, right? So when you want to innovate as a CFO, you have to create that culture of innovation in your team. And that culture is not going to come about when people are doing things just the way things have been done. You have to be able to question things to make a change. Again, taking another example, this may or may not have happened. Do you know of the 5 monkeys experiment?
No.
So the 5 monkeys experiment was, it may not have ever happened, but let's take some lessons from that, right?
Okay.
So a bunch of bananas were hung up on a string, and there was a ladder in a room, and 5 monkeys were placed in a room. And a researcher was watching what was happening. One of the monkeys went up to get the bananas. It reached up to the bananas. The moment that happened, the researcher sprayed all the monkeys with very, very cold water. They all shook, got scared, came down, and left the bananas there. After some time, a second monkey got confidence, tried to do the same thing. Again, water sprayed. Same effect.
Yeah.
Everybody got back. Over time, all the 5 monkeys did that, and they understood it is not worthwhile to go up. So the researcher then took one monkey out from the test set and added a new monkey which had not seen this phenomenon. He also put away the hose or watering pipe. When the new monkey went up to get the bananas, the other 4 monkeys thrashed this monkey because they did not want to get cold water on themselves. Most interesting thing is when you replaced one of the older monkeys and you had 2 new monkeys, let's say, and 3 from the original set, when the latest monkey tried to do the same activity, the monkey which had just come in before also joined in the fun and thrashed. Because that's how people say that's how things are done here, right? So the first thing that you have to change in the teams is to change the mindset. It's a culture of innovation. That has to change. And that doesn't come overnight. That comes by empowering your teams. That comes by actually pushing them to learn, upskill them. So that comes by creating an environment where failure is not a mistake. Fail quick and learn. That has to be supported. And psychological safety. So that people are able to speak up and actually make a change. Who doesn't want to make a change? People are worried as to what somebody will think of or what the idea. No idea is bad, right? So once you create that culture, innovation can happen. And for myself, speaking for myself, yes, upskilling is a big thing. Over the course of my career, I've added on many certifications just to make sure, even if to just give myself a confirmation that I'm doing the right thing, but just to be up to date with what's happening in the market, right? And today, with all these new skills and stuff like that, multiple training courses available within the firm for us to learn. So that's a big point that people have to show that interest to continually grow in their career.
I feel like you've developed a very strong sense of your tenets or your dogma of leadership, right? Which I think is very important. At some point in your career, you decide certain things that you believe in and how you project those things to people. And one of the key tenets you keep mentioning is that failure is inevitable. Like you need to learn from failure. You know what people say, you have victories and you have lessons. There's no failures. Is there one particular, downturn that you almost subscribe and say, hey, this is a moment that taught me a lot that I carried with me? Not a regret, but something that taught me enough for me to, go.
Yeah, of course. Because in one of the organizations that I've worked, we were trying to implement sort of a reporting solution, right? And that reporting solution followed a basic approach of whatever was a standardized reporting process. Let's say it went on to add things together, put them into an SQL database, and then pulled out reports. This is the old time. So that is the way it is structured. But the process that we were trying to apply that thing to was not built that way. It was built with all sorts of unstructured data. It was not really built with numbers and data which is meant for addition. Much down the path, having got there, we realized that is not fit for purpose. Built something which is, because that is how finance built things, we built something like that and said, let's put this thing through there. So the initial idea had not been fully thought through to completion, because everybody thought if we are able to get this, it will solve the problem. So it is that's a big realization to understand the problem first and then solutionize. Don't get the solution and think it'll fit all your problems. And then it turned out it's a workflow solution, which is the right thing. So it's a learning, it's an understanding. But again, we were able to course correct much earlier in the day before it went out fully in the project. So sometimes you have to understand sunk cost and fallacy and then move on and do something different and then actually get it right. So simple learning, something which may be the simplest, you turn it away for the sake of building something which is more complex. The ideas and solutions don't have to be complex. Again, with AI, the question is not about implementing AI everywhere. Maybe some process doesn't need AI at all.
Yeah.
It just needs simple robotic process automation. Adding brew showed it and then doing a big show is not what is going
There's
to
no
lead
need
to the
for it,
outside.
yeah.
It's just you have to look at the simplest solutions and they might well achieve our aims. I don't think everybody needs the biggest solutions. Some of the
No.
processes that we do are pretty basic in nature. But that learning, coming back to the point, was to say that do not solutionize before you understand the real crux of the problem.
Yeah, I think I can't remember who. Maybe this is a hoax, but I think it was Einstein who said, "Understanding the problem is 80% of solving the problem."
Absolutely.
Right? And you're right. In that, time is the biggest sunk cost. You waste a bunch of time. Like it's effort, time, and then a different understanding that you've developed that you didn't need to go in that direction.
It's also Kidlin's law, right? That if you write down the problem clearly and structured in the way,
Yes,
and then
exactly.
you solve the problem already.
Yes.
If you are able to write it down so clearly
Yeah.
as to what is the real problem, you solved it already.
Like experts, when they say you're only an expert when you can explain it to a 5-year-old
No,
because you've understood it.
That's true. So I think in trying to simplify things, if we make that effort to make complicated things simple, we will get to sleep.
Very cool. I feel like storytelling is also a very big part of your leadership, right? And it's fascinating. I've always liked to listen to people explain concepts, explain principles, explain maybe ideas through stories. Do you have maybe a situation where framing or reframing a narrative changed the way the outcome was?
Very, very interesting. And that's a very, very interesting concept that I apply all the time because you've seen my journey. You've seen my journey from being a marketing person to spending time in the jewelry shop to running a marketing program to then running cards to the company. So I understand, like I said before, the king sees the full picture, which is with the elephant story, going back to the elephant story. And then if you're there and you have to get your strategy out to everybody, you have to tell your story to everybody. Everybody needs to be told the story in the way that appeals to them. The person who's tugging the rope needs to be told why the rope has to be there as such. And somebody who's holding the trunk has to be told it differently. So let's take a simple example. Let's say you have financials of a company. Let's try to make it simple to not a 5-year-old, but at least you folks who understand finance to a large extent, right? So you have the company's financials and the company has a target on return on equity. So ultimately, when it comes to the frontline individual who's going and trying to sell a product to a customer, you have to break it down as to what it means to that individual. So you look at your top line, you look at your revenue, you look at your cost, impairment, PBT, then you look at your RWA, then you look at returns. All of these matters can be addressed by different people. You might go to credit and say, I need to optimize RWA. You might manage costs yourself by working with all the business heads, correct? And when you work with other business heads, you might drive returns differently, meaning in terms of top line. But when you go to the frontline person, what does the target of return on equity for the firm mean to the frontline individual who's selling the product? So you have to then tell them what it means to price the product. But to price the product, if you work it backwards, or you add it from the top, you add the price of the product, gross margin, you get your revenues, then you have your costs, then you have your PBT, impairment PBT, then you have your asset RWA, then your returns. But you must be able to see across all these lines and tell them, if you price it at 3%, if all of the other things remain the same, the firm will make 10%. But if you're able to get 3.5%, maybe we'll make 10.1%. So much more, so much volume. So that is why we have told you, you have to do this. But you don't need to tell the full story to them. You need to tell them that this is the pricing that I want. But to be able to break down everybody's interest and tell them the right answer is important. If you went and told them the full story as to why the returns are so much and then you have to do that won't work, right?
It's like stimulus overload.
Yeah, you have to appeal to different people's motivations and tell them the story that you can influence an outcome. Ultimately you're trying to influence a decision, right? It's all about communication skills and influencing decisions. So you're trying to tell the right story to the right person in the way it appeals to them so that they understand how they fit into the larger person, right?
I think this is also part of sales, right? It's understanding the pain points of people and, telling them, I guess, a couple of things, why you, why my product, and why now being the right time.
Absolutely.
Very fascinating. If you had unlimited resources, unlimited, approvals, what's one absolute transformation that you would bring to a legacy system today?
So the legacy systems, as you see, right, have been built on top of one another. It is not possible to slash out and take out what is a legacy system. But thankfully now with cloud and things being hosted in the cloud, it is easier to make one cutover to a system which can then take bits and bobs and add it together instead of a physically housed system which cannot be updated regularly. So the biggest thing could be if we leverage the cloud entirely so that we're able to quickly switch over into anything that we want. Instead of looking at, obviously the stack is all old, but once you get out of the cloud, you also then bring in the aspect of being able to interface with other companies, let's say other technology companies, fintechs. If you're not in the cloud, you're not going to be able to communicate with everybody directly. So I think that is, for me, as I see in the market, as I speak to other people, if everybody is there and if that is done, then you could unshackle yourself, right? Still, a lot of the firms in this region, financial institutions, are still not entirely in the cloud.
Yeah, I think when you say transition to cloud infrastructure, it's priming yourself for innovation.
Yeah.
Because when the time comes when you need to input certain
can
things,
plug and play, right?
Exactly.
So that you are at least providing the base stack to then build into different things. So
absolutely.
that would be a big step up for everybody.
And the flip side of it, this is future thinking, but if you're speaking to someone, 23, 25, 26, either working in audit, either working in FP&A, either working front office banking, some kind of finance role, and they see themselves as a future CFO, what's a piece of advice you'd give?
So my advice would be do multiple roles. Don't see yourself as a person who brings one skill set to the table. You have to understand the business drivers. That's a given. Whether you're actually managing the business, whether you're an FP&A person or a treasury person, you have to understand how your business makes money, how the parts come together. That you have to understand. That is a given for anybody across the team. But please do not do only one role. Don't become an expert in accounting only, or in auditing only, or in FP&A. Do multiple roles, because then you can sort of weave in all the skills together and see the part as a whole. As a CFO, you see the part as a whole. But if you don't do multiple roles, you're severely limiting yourself, especially with all the new things which are coming today in terms of AI and roles.
Absolutely.
If not falling away, at least getting augmented. For you to be more versatile is the call of the day. So you have to really look to do multiple roles. Very strongly suggest that people do 18 to 24 month rotations between financial control, FP&A, treasury, other roles, and maybe a stint in business as well. So looking back at my career, maybe a stint in business also. So you appreciate where the other person is coming. You might still have your core skill, but you should need to appreciate where the other person is coming.
I think also, how you mentioned you came from almost an operational side of things to then understanding the finances and then having that holistic view. We see nowadays a lot of people, they'll go to like the MBBs in consulting, they'll go strategy consulting, they'll do investment banking, and then they will try to transition to CFOs roles, which are, again, their version of CFO is very strategy focused and outward thinking. If you, for example, today had a subsidiary that you were hiring a local or regional CFO for, what would your inherent bias be? Someone who's trained in FP&A and audit and financial controls, or someone who's been a consultant or an investment banker and has learned different industries and different...
I think my view, because I come from a highly regulated industry, is slightly different. We are not looking at... I would not, as a banking individual, look at people with entirely different skill sets from a regular finance person. Because, like I mentioned before, the engine room is financial control. And that's not only regular reporting, there's a lot of regulatory reporting. And that has to be absolutely right in the way you communicate your institution's business to the regulator. So people with that experience are highly valued. And if it's only one person, like if there's a wider team and then you had many roles, then you could look at other bits and bobs of people. But the starting function has to be a strong financial control function, which can ensure that the reporting and the conscience keeper role is done right. And then you can add on the other parts to it. But if you just talk to a CFO with no background
in controls,
in controls, while it may be very good for somebody like a startup in which they're trying to scale up, maybe go to market, maybe go to IPO, whatever, that may work there, as opposed to somebody who's more in a traditional industry, still highly regulated. So you have to get your basics right. So it's very important.
Absolutely. I'm inclined to agree. Even though I'm doing the opposite, I'm inclined to agree. We've also seen, geopolitical tensions, these days are rising, and you don't have to speak on behalf of, where you are in particular. But for example, I was sitting down with a telecom company last week, quite a big one. I cannot name them. And they hired someone recently to be head of geopolitics, which it's technically a new role, a made up role, but it is quite important in the context of today's environment. How do you tackle geopolitical tensions?
So institutions have multiple functions, and this is where the independent voice of reason comes in.
Mhm.
An internal audit function would be independent, reporting to the board.
Mhm.
Similarly, there would always be a function which manages reputation risk,
Mhm.
right? And they are also a voice of reason, which is independent of all the core functions, which may drive it some differently. So that function would be tasked with looking at what all is happening in the world and what is the right decision for the firm to take in any jurisdiction. So that would be led by that function, and their entire remit is to ensure that we're doing the right thing for both the customer and for the employees and for the firm, and as an independent arbiter of things, not led by other functions which you could have. So that could be typically like the role you're already calling out, which already exists in all big institutions, which would be an independent role.
Very interesting. But is that role typically more qualitative in terms of, the reputational risk? Or is it also technical and they guide, for example, treasury, or they guide the hedges you
they
take
would
in?
they would be able to advise each function on what is the right path to take.
Very interesting.
Definitely would. And I think this is across all institutions. This is a standard sort of practice.
Very interesting. Okay, I have a quick fire, almost like 3 or 4 questions that's
Mhm.
quick fire that I wanted to test out with you. So it's one word responses, or it's like a 10-second response, either one. What's one book that changed how you think about leadership?
So look at Atomic Habits. Very, very solid book. Very simple book. Even my kids can read. But apply it. Apply the simplest principles in your life. Develop the habits. Make it one day. Repeat it day after day. Make it a ultimate habit, like I said. Make it part of your persona and establish a routine. I think Atomic Habits is one real book, I would say. If you asked me another book which really moved me, this Atomic Habits has more to do with what is best for everybody to apply in their life. But Viktor Frankl's book really good.
Which one is it?
Man's Life for Meaning.
Man's Life for Meaning.
Yeah.
Interesting. I've never, but I'll pick it up. Interesting.
Maybe I'm getting the full word wrong, but that's
okay.
Really
we can figure it out. What is that? Was that philosophical?
So that Viktor Frankl was a Jewish prisoner in World War II.
Okay.
He survived the concentration camp, and while all his people around him sort of mourned about their situation in life, and he looked forward to what he was looking forward to. So there's another book I'm reading right at the moment, Courage to be Disliked, right? So this is Adlerian philosophy. So it is to say the trauma doesn't shape you, but you can choose your goal and what you want to be. What you've gone through is in the past, but your future is in your control. So he survived the concentration camp while multiple people around him died because they did not have hope for the future. And he's written about man's life to meaning. I'm just getting the name.
But I get what you mean. It is that mindset. It's
mindset.
like the myth of Sisyphus thing, right? Where Albert Camus said, if you're picking up a boulder and you have to push it over the mountain and it comes back down every day of your life, the only way to find meaning and happiness is to enjoy that experience.
Yes.
Because you're forced to.
Absolutely. And look at the future course. It's not so much about hope itself, but have a goal as to what you want to see your thing to be. And
very cool. That was not rapid fire. I'm sorry. The second question is...
that's right.
The second question is, what's your favorite tech tool in your CFO, toolkit?
See, unfortunately, whether you like it or not, I moved from Lotus Notes to Excel.
Okay.
Ultimately, when you finally have to make sure of something for yourself, it's almost like you're writing it on your sheet and then doing the numbers for yourself. Excel is almost like that. It's become part of my DNA, so I can't let go of that yet.
Completely understood.
It's not a big tech tool, but I can't let go.
I completely understand. Are you the kind of person that's off mouse completely, just keyboard?
Yeah, I can work only off the keyboard. Yeah, I can use mouse much. Yeah,
I get that. Okay, what's the hardest part about being a CFO?
So you have to say no. Like I said, you have to say no. But like I mentioned before, you have your valid reasons. for being an independent voice, which will challenge, which will look to solutionize, but has to play an independent role.
Interesting. Okay. And saying no is actually quite tough. And then finally, what is a legacy that you'd like to leave behind at Barclays, and a legacy that you'd like to leave behind personally?
So for me, stewardship is a big thing. So I take huge pride in what I build. So when I leave behind something, I want the people coming and say, "Oh, this was built by Ram. This is so good. It was built by Ram." The legacy should be that you improved something for far better from when you took it on. So that legacy, a process of improvement altogether. So when somebody inherits something, they really see the changes which have happened. So that's really the legacy. It's called stewardship. That's what I would see this thing. On a personal level, I'm looking at more my purpose itself, a sense of accomplishment, and accomplishment not coming from validation from external third parties, but from a self-validation perspective. I'm finding my purpose still.
That's interesting, because when you mentioned, sorry, I'm just gonna comment on your answer. When you mentioned the fact that you want to leave something behind that people will speak to, that almost says, in case someone else improves it, do you feel almost?
I'll feel happy, because it's a continuous process of improvement, right? So you like your thing so much, but you're not attached to something.
Exactly.
It has to improve. I think
that's perfect. That's perfect in terms of purpose. I don't have any more questions. Thank you so much for being here. This was a wonderful conversation.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me.